Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. We're going to be colouring up this beautiful image by Jennifer Zimmermann. Let's go in and have a look. Hi guys, we've got this beautiful image by Jennifer Zimmermann. This is actually the grayscale version of the image. So if you'd like to check the image out, it is available in grayscale and line art. So I'll pop the links in the description below there for you. Now I'm colouring it up with POLYCHROMOS today, and the video has been sped up by 2 just because it was about 3.5 hours long. So just to cut that down for you guys, I've done it in 2 speed. I am going to run through everything with you so that you can follow along to this grayscale image. Now I did just recently do a POLYCHROMOS grayscale image on my channel as a colour along, so we're going to be using very similar techniques that we did in that one as well. So at the moment I am using red violet in the POLYCHROMOS, and I'm going into all of the shadow areas. So I'm following the areas that were already marked out by Jennifer when she actually did the original line art. She's coloured that in and then turned it into a grayscale, so I'm following along in those shadows. So we like to use really light pressure on this first layer because we just want to mark out those areas, and I don't like to go in and indent the paper straight away because once you do that you can't go back over it. It's really hard to layer colour on. So always doing a very light layer to start with to mark everything out for you. This way too, if you do find that it's not quite dark enough or you haven't put enough shadows in, you can always go back in on that second layer and make those areas a little bit deeper and larger, or the same with the light. If you think that it was too dark, you could then go in with your lighter colours and make them a little bit larger instead of the darker shadow colours. So I'm coming down to the rest of the body now. It is quite easy colouring in grayscale because everything's already marked out for you. So what we're actually doing is just adding colour to the areas of the skin that were already marked out and already shadowed. We're just creating our own colours rather than using obviously Jennifer's original image. So it's a great way to experiment. It's a great way to practice, especially when it comes to shading and things like that, because you've got that option to follow along, and it sort of starts to ingrain in you that, oh, I need to have shadows under this section because, you know, there's a cast shadow there, or I need to add a shadow here to show some shape in the face. So those sorts of things will come to you as you do more and more of this kind of thing. I do really encourage you to have a go if you haven't tried it before, because it really does make a difference when it comes to colouring your own line art images as well. So I'm just going to finish off this colour and then we'll move on to the next one. So I wanted to give this fairy princess a really sort of magical kind of glow. So I've gone with a yellow color to make the glow. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put this color in the background as well so that it looks like it's glowing onto her skin. So I've chosen light cadmium yellow in the POLYCHROMOS to start this off. I'm just going to go into those very, very light areas and add this in. Now what will happen is as I start to build up the other colours in the skin, I will be covering over a lot of the area that I'm actually roughly putting in now. That's why I'm going in really, really light so I can adjust those levels and the amount of light that I've got in there at a later stage. I just want to take this moment to point out that you don't have to use yellow for a glow. You could use any color that you wanted to make a light color on the skin. So perhaps you might have wanted blue or purple or something like that in there. You would just take this color out and replace it with those colors. The only thing is that those things tend to be not as bright. If you have got a really bright or even fluoro color, that would be okay, but just be wary that if you go for a purple and it's a little bit too dark, it's not going to look like a highlight. So I guess what I'm saying is try to stick to those really, really light colors or fluoro colors because they're going to really stand out a lot more. So I actually missed the hand, so I'm just going to go back in with that red violet and do the hand shadows. I dropped my pencil and left a mark on the page, all good. I'm going to go finish off this red violet and then I'm going to continue on with that light cadmium yellow and finish off the yellow highlight sections. So I'm done with the light cadmium yellow. I'm going to come back in now with some cinnamon. Cinnamon is going to be some of my mid-tone colors. I'm going to go over the top of the red violet color and I'm going to extend this further out. So we're just lightly covering over the top of the red violet and we're coming closer towards the really bright yellow sections now. Some of those areas we're going to start to fill in a little bit because they did still have some grey tone in there. So we only went over the darkest grey tone colours to start with. Now we're going to start to fill in the rest of those grey tone colours. So we're going to continue to build up on the skin colours. We're going to use some medium flesh and we're going to repeat the same steps. So you'll notice that we're starting to come over those yellow sections now and get those nicely blended in on the very edges of them so that they do look like they are a part of the actual skin colour. We're going to have most of the skin covered over by this stage. We still will have some slightly grey areas underneath those yellow sections, which I'm going to come back in and cover over everything with the light flesh in a little while. But just for now, we're going to try to get most of the skin covered in and most of the grey areas that were underneath those yellow areas all filled in now. As I've gradually built up each layer, I'm still using really light pressure. So I'm holding my pencil at the very end and making sure that I've got that on a bit of an angle like that so that it's still nice and soft on the paper. Because we don't want to push down the tooth of the paper too soon, we want to make sure that we keep these layers nice and light. So I'm bringing in light flesh now. I'm going to go over everything. I'm going to go into those really light pale yellow sections very, very lightly, and I'm going to make sure that the edges of those are blended in nicely now. So making sure that the color between the flesh color and then the yellow is nice blended between those, so there's no actual line where you can see that that yellow has sort of crossed over into the skin color. We want that to blend in really nicely. So very, very lightly going over the top of that as well to help blend that in nice and smoothly, and we're going to come back over and brighten those things up on our second layer round. So we're going to be working on some of our final layers now. I've got ivory and I'm going over this section here with the ivory to blend in all of this color nicely. Now I'm going to swap and change now with each section that I'm doing because each section is slightly different and I want different colors and different tones to come through. So at the moment I'm using ivory. I've got to come back in with that light cadmium yellow now just to brighten up some of the yellow on the hands because it did really soften off once I started to add on that ivory color, and I really did want it a little bit brighter than it was. So I've just gone in with that cadmium yellow again and just lighten those areas up. I'm going to finish off blending out this entire hand with the ivory. So guys, I went off and came back to my image and I wanted to blend that skin a little bit more. You may not be able to see it very clearly here through the camera, but the hand wasn't quite blended as well as I wanted it to be. So I've come in with the Luminance white pencil, so that's the Caran d'Ache one, and I'm just going to go in and go over the top of all of this skin and try to blend that in a little bit more. Now the reason I use the Caran d'Ache one is because it's really smooth and creamy and it seems to go over everything. If you don't have that one, you could possibly use the Prismacolor white, which does a very similar job. It's not quite as opaque as this one. The reason I don't use the POLYCHROMOS white is because it's not soft and creamy and it doesn't seem to blend as nicely and as smoothly as what the Caran d'Ache Luminance does. So I'm just going over the skin color here now just to smooth all this in. So I've actually got a list of materials and colours used, which will be included in the description, so check that out. The pen that I'm using right now, I'm using a pencil extender with the Caran d'Ache Full Blender. You could use any blender with this, or you might like to leave it how it was. I've decided to go in with the blender just to soften off the rest of the tooth there. So we have that light cadmium yellow again, and now we're just going to start to brighten up some of the areas down on the chest. So just coming in over the top of what we'd already done. So we've gone over this with the light flesh and now I'm just brightening it up again just to bring out that really nice glow. So now I'm kind of going a little bit backwards. We're going to start with the white this time, going over the top of everything and blending in that skin nice and smooth. That way, if we need to add a little bit more color in there, I can still go over the top of this white. Because it's so soft and creamy, it doesn't really, it flattens off the tooth, but it gives you a layer that you can actually go back in over the top of with the POLYCHROMOS. So it's quite nice, this pencil, and it's worth investing in one if you've had a look at them before and weren't sure. They're absolutely brilliant and I love them. So it's one of my favorite products that I do have. It's listed in my favorites down in the description as well, so it's worth having a look at. All of the other products are also listed in the description as well, so if you want to check those out. They are the US Amazon links, but I just wanted to have them there for you so that you could see them, and once you've seen that physical sort of picture of the packages and things like that, you might be able to source it from somewhere else cheaper, so by all means do that. Just coming in now with this Luminance still, colouring over the top of everything in the neck down and making sure it's nice and flat. So I've used the Caran d'Ache Full Blender just to go back over the top of that to brighten up some of those deeper shadow areas. So what you'll find is that when you go back over it with this Caran d'Ache Full Blender, the darker colours seem to darken up more. It makes it more rich, I think, because it's flattening off the tooth and smudging out that colour into the rest of the paper. Coming back in with the white a little bit just to smooth off some areas. So having pushed down the tooth, I can see where there's some areas that weren't quite coloured over enough or weren't blended enough. Just filling in a little bit under the shoulder here with the medium flesh. I missed a little bit when I was doing it to start with. Back in with the white again now. You can see that I circle over some of those highlight sections a little bit more, just making sure that they're a little bit brighter than other areas. And I'm smoothing off the very edge between the two colours, so between the yellow and the flesh tones. You can see that I'm putting in a lot of colour there, just to smooth that area off. So I'll actually swap over to the larger white Caran d'Ache pencil in a moment, because the little one was getting too tough on my hand, and my favourite extender I'm using with my full blender, so I'm still looking into getting some more extenders because quite often there's a few pencils at once that are quite low, but that's why I have the longer white pencil in a moment. I'm going to go back in. Some of these areas are a little bit too light and I can still see a little bit of grey tone through them. So I'm just coming back in now with the darker colours, and you can see even though I've gone over with that white, it's still coming out quite nicely on the paper. That's because the wax has left a layer there, and it's really easy to go over with these oil-based pencils now and just fill in a little bit more colour. So I've got the red violet now, and I'm just going back into some of those shadow areas just to deepen them up a little bit, and I'm flattening them off with the Caran d'Ache blender. So in those areas I just flattened off, I want to just blend out the colour a little bit more using the cinnamon now. So now that I've just smudged the rest of that colour in with the blender, it just creates a nice sort of mix of colour through there, and it smudges in really nicely with that white. So that's why I'm using the blender, just to smooth all that out. Now I think that the skin needs a little bit more of a yellow tone in where the actual skin tone is. So I'm going to actually use the ivory, and I'm going to come in and do more ivory over the top of all of the skin on the neck and the chest now. I'm going to continue and add a little bit more up the top on the face as well. And I've got the white Caran d'Ache pencil, Luminance again, and this is the larger and newer pencil, so I've got a better grip there. And I'm just going to go in over the top of everything and just blend all this in nice and smooth together. Now it is apparent that it is quite light in the face, so I will have to come back in with some of those darker colours and just deepen some areas up. But I want to smooth out this skin first and make sure that the rest of it's nice. I'm going to go back in with that full blender and just soften off the rest of the skin, and then I'm going to come back in with some of those darker tones and just deepen some of those areas up. I can see around the eyes there that I can still see some grey, so I'm going to go and fix those areas up now as well. So I'm going to start off with the cinnamon, going around all of the nose and the other grey areas in the face that haven't quite got enough colour in them. Just got my mono eraser and I'm just rubbing out some of the colour that went out on the hair. Still using the cinnamon there to fill in some more of these areas that were still a little bit grey rather than skin coloured. I'm going to make some tonal adjustments through the skin, even down on the chest as well, just filling in a little bit more into that shadow area. Not enough that I wanted the red violet because it's quite dark, but just enough to put a little bit more tone and depth through those areas. I'm also lining out around the grayscale line that's on the outside of her body. I don't want to leave that grey, I want that to be a colour, so coming in with the cinnamon to finish that off as well. So just check as you're going, make sure that there's no grey areas left on the skin because that's going to look kind of strange, leaving some slightly grey areas. You want to try and go over all of the grey with a colour. So let's come and brighten up some of these yellow areas with that light cadmium yellow, just going over the top of them. In the very, very lightest sections, I'm making sure that that's nice and bright. And just adding a few more bits and pieces through to make it look more even and over the face. So I'm using the ivory to soften some of that off. So now I want to move on to the colour in the background a little bit. I want to add in the rest of the yellow now. So I'm just going to lightly layer this over all of the really light circles and pop this colour down. This is still the light cadmium yellow, and then we're going to fill around that with a purple colour. I'm quite happy with the skin at this stage. I may not do anything extra to it. I may do once I've added in the eye colour and the lips. We'll just see how it looks once we've done that. So I'm going to use violet to go around those areas. So I'm going to start really lightly and I'm going to gradually just get deeper and deeper as I go in. Obviously the bottom section is a lot darker than the top section, so I will be doing it a lot darker down here. But for now I'm just going in and marking it in, and I'll gradually build it up as I continue over. So we're going to just go over it maybe twice to go and fill that in. So I will adjust it in areas where I feel that it needs to be a bit darker as well, and also adjust the lighter and make sure that it's light enough as well. So I'm just going to go in and do the violet now. So just using the mono eraser to rub out some areas on the yellow that I wanted to stay yellow and make those circles a little bit more even. I'm going to go over the top of this, just updating that yellow now, making it a little bit brighter. Also, as I said, using the eraser to rub out some sections. I actually want to go over the top of the whole area with white and make it nice and smooth and kind of fuzzy. I don't want it to be really defined. I want it to sort of fade out in the edges and things like that, so the white will help to do that as well. So I've got the Luminance white, and I'm just going to go over everything now and blend all this together nicely. I'm going to start in the lighter sections and move out towards the darker sections so that we don't smudge the violet back into that yellow. So I'm going to use dark red for the darker areas of the lips. Also too, some of the peach has gone on the lips. I'm just going to rub that off with the mono eraser just to get rid of the colour off there so that I can blend this colour in nicely together. So I'm using dark red for the darker sections. Just going over the areas on the lips that were the darkest in the grey tone colour and just filling this colour out. So you can see we're starting to create a dark shadow area between the lips, where it would actually be the darkest because it's touching together there. I'm going to blend it out with alizarin crimson. So you can see that I've left the very highlighted sections because they're the lightest parts. I may have just slightly gone over them with that color but not actually filled it in completely. We're going to use ivory to go over those really light sections and lighten that off, and also to help blend in that color together. We're going to gradually build up a little bit more color in here so they're nice and rich as well. Got alizarin crimson again coming back in over the top of everything and just brightening up this color a little bit more because we dulled it off with that ivory, but we wanted to put the ivory in because it just softens it off that little bit as well. Using white gel pen to put in some pretty little highlights on the lips in the areas that had been left already. Just coming in a little bit closer because I want to do the eyes for you, and I want to show you how you can make those eyes look a little bit more realistic by adding in some highlights and shadow areas and things like that. So we're going to start with Cold Grey 3. And what I'm actually doing is going over the top of the whites of the eye to create a little bit of a curve in those sections. The eyes aren't flat. They're going to be rounded off. So we want to make sure that those areas have a little bit of color in them to show that they've got some depth and that they've got a little bit of shape in them as well. I'm blending it out with the Luminance white. And now I've got some black to add in a little bit more depth, just to define the lashes and also take off any of the color that's sort of rubbed in over the top of it now. And I'm redefining those eyelashes and perhaps putting a few more in there, just making them look a little bit more realistic. Just using the Cold Grey 3 just to rub off any areas or soften off the areas around the black and the white sections of the eye. So it's just going to soften it off so it doesn't quite look as defined, and just using the white again just to go in and finish off and brighten up and smudge in that color so it doesn't look quite so defined. Still using the black to finish off the rest of the eyelashes here. So I'm going to bring in some medium flesh, and I'm going to do under the fleshy parts of the eye or the waterline area, and also in the little corner parts of the eye as well. Some of this is going onto the whites of the eye also. It just adds a little bit more character, a little bit more depth in there as well. I'm making sure that under the eye has been done a little bit there as well, just to make sure we've got a little bit of color in there and it's not just white. I'm going to use Perusian or Prussian blue, one of those, and I'm going to start to fill out some of the colored parts of the eye. So you can see that I'm going in really dark around the top section, and I've really lightened it off around the bottom section of the eye. I did still cover over that bottom section with a light layer of that just to blend that in later on, because I still want some of that color through there. I've also gone around the iris area of the eye and also right around the pupil there as well, and made that quite dark too. So I'm going to continue and use that cold grey to lighten up the bottom section of the eyes there. So I didn't want to go over it with white. I wanted it to kind of be a little bit grey and blue together. I've got the black again just to define the pupils and around the top section there of the eye. I've left that very bright section in the middle there because I want to put the white gel pen in there and really lighten that up. So the black really did make those shadow areas really nice and deep, and we want them deep so that they look further back. I'm using the white now just to lighten up these areas of the eyes, and also I've popped a little bit on the actual coloured section of the eye as well to show there's a little bit of shine there. Also, I've put a couple of really small dots on the very waterline to make it look like the eyes are slightly wet as well. So we've done the face now. We've got to finish off the eyebrows, and we've also got to finish up the hair and the outside. Now I noticed that the lip was slightly off there, so I've just used the eraser and just rubbed that off slightly, and I'll redefine that with the medium flesh and just lighten that off a little bit with the ivory. just going to redefine the lip there with the dark red as well. So it was slightly off in shape, so now we've just adjusted that and made it look a little bit more the shape that it needed to be. Looking good. So we're going to move on and we're going to finish off the other elements. We're going to leave the bird till last because I actually wasn't sure what color to do him, and I wanted to look up what color a robin actually is. I've got Caput Mortem Violet, I think that's how you say it. I've listed it in the list obviously, and I'm just going into the eyebrow section here and I'm just marking out the bottom section, and I'm flicking out little lines just to create a little bit of texture like hair. I'm just going in and doing it nice and roughly. We're going to come in over the top and build up some more of this color. I'm putting some lines at the top and some at the bottom, and I'm just sort of mixing this in a little bit, making it kind of dotty, I guess, and textured. We're going to come in now with just Caput Mortem. Anyway, we're going to come in with that one, and we're just going to go over the top and fill in the rest of the grey area there. So we're going to build up on the hair now using these colours that we've used in the eyebrows. So first of all, I'm starting with the Caput Mortem Violet. Is that how you say it? Everyone's trying to tell me how it's said, but yeah, it's hard to explain how my brain works when it comes to things like this. Anyhow, I'm coming in and you'll see that I'm actually marking over the areas that are really dark. So the darkest grey areas I'm going in. But I'm not just going to follow the grey areas that are on the page. I'm going to create some really nice texture and actually create some nice hair through here by creating some really nice fine, very fine lines through the whole hair section. So what we're actually going to do is I'm marking around all of the shadows first, very, very, very fine sharpened pencil. And I'm just going in and then I'm going to flick some lines through the grayscale sections and create some texture there by adding in some lines through the lighter sections as well. I'm basically going to use the darker sections for my shadows, which will create those nice sort of nooks and crannies in the hair where it's sort of sitting in front of each other and behind each other. We want those really dark sections as well, but also I want some of this dark hair to come out through those lighter sections so you can see that color in there as well. So what I'm doing is I'm lining around all of the things that are sitting on the hair, and I'm making sure that I use those shadow areas that are already there, and I'm filling in those with this color a fair bit, but I'm also going into the light areas and putting a small sort of line through each of those light areas as well. We're just going to continue to use lines. We're not going to anywhere throughout the hair, we're not going to use the pencil as a shading in part. We're going to make sure that we always use lines. So I'm not going to shade anything roughly with the pencil. I'm going to try to always use lines through the hair. Now, I think that's the biggest thing when creating hair, is making sure that you continue to use lines, even though there's a dark shaded area there and it's really, really, I don't know, hard to not just shade that area in. We want to really create texture. So I'm not shading, I'm always doing lines. Lots and lots of lines, okay? So we're going to flick our pencil out and we're going to make sure that we continue to do lines, and I'm going to continue doing those lines until you can't tell that it's a grayscale picture anymore and that it's created its own hair, its own texture and things like that. So just make sure you keep lining. Also, I'm using medium to heavy pressure here. Some areas I don't want to have to come back in and deepen up, so I'm just doing it straight away as a kind of firm, medium to firm pressure. So we want to create these lines and make them more permanent. Now, I think that doing layers in the hair, trying to do really light flicks through and then trying to go back over them later actually fills in too much of the hair, and you'll find that it becomes more just one color rather than lots of individual strands of hair. So we want to continue doing this with that sort of medium to firm pressure so that when we don't have to come back in, and as I said, we don't want to fill everything in so it becomes all one color. We want to make sure that we get individual texture and hair lines through here. So I've just lightened up the camera at the bottom here, just so you can see the actual lines going over the top of that grayscale, and also how I'm using the lighter sections to do smaller lines through as well. So you can see that I'm trying to make these lines blend in together but not blend in together. So I'm trying to make sure that they come from the right direction. I'm not doing them in all directions all over the hair. I'm trying to follow the directional angle of the hair. So if the hair looks like it's leaning to one way, I'm trying to make sure that I flick and do my lines out that way as well, so that it looks like the hair is flowing in one direction or flowing in all directions but in the same direction at the same time. So any bend or kink in the hair, you make sure that you follow that direction and that angle, just to create a little bit more realism in it. So I think I'm pretty close to finishing with this color. Now obviously I've got this as a fast speed, so doing it slowly is going to take a lot longer. I've just zoomed out a bit so you can see how I've started to define sections of hair and how I've actually created those lines throughout every section. So we're going to move on now to the next color. We're using Caput Mortuum. Yep, we're using that one. And we're going to come over the same areas. We're going to make some of those lines a little bit longer. We're going to come in between some of them. We're just going to create a little bit more texture and continue to build on these lines. So I'm going to add some black, keeping it nice and fine, and I'm going to bring this around most of those shadow areas. So where that clip is sitting on the hair, it needs to have a little bit more depth behind it to make it look like it's sitting on the hair. I'm also going to put a few streaks of this through the rest of the hair as well, mainly in those shadow areas. Back to the caput mortem, and continuing on to make these sections even more. I didn't do the top of the head with this one really yet, so I'm going in now to fill out those sections. I want to put some of the yellow that we used in the background into her hair as well, and I'm going in and putting a few streaks of this through the very lightest sections of the hair mainly, just to make sure that the colour is in there. So that was light cadmium yellow. I'm going to add a lighter brown now. I've got burnt ochre, and I'm going to come in and repeat the same steps. So some areas I'm going to be going over the same lines, and others I'm creating new lines. I'm making sure that I do bring this out over those highlight sections now, because these are the lighter brown, and I want to make sure I put the lighter brown in those lighter areas as well. So making sure that I go over all of those areas. I'm doing it really quite roughly now, and I'm not doing as many lines as what I was doing earlier, but I'm still doing lines in that motion along with the hair as I go. So I wanted to bring a pink tone in to do those very lighter sections. I kind of wanted to have reddy blonde hair, but it ended up being a mixture of colours. I'm using the light peach now to repeat the steps that I've done before, and mainly just going over those lighter areas and making sure that I'm putting some colour in on the white space that was left in the background of the streaks of hair now. So I'm wanting to make sure that there's colour in all of the sections. I don't want to leave any grayscale or white left behind, so I want to make sure we cover over those sections. Still using lines. So to fill in the rest of those lighter sections, I'm using ivory. I'm making sure that I come in from the very depths as well as going over the highlights, because some of those areas in the deeper, darker sections haven't been covered over either. They've still got grayscale through them, and I want to add a little bit of texture through those areas as well and make it look like individual strands of hair too. So I've come in with that to go over those sections as well. So now we've lightened off some of those darker areas, we want to come back in with those darker colours now and repeat the same steps so that we can gradually build up these layers of hair and make them look a lot deeper and fuller than what they would if we just left them with the shaded parts of hair. So I hope that you understand sort of the concept of how we're sort of bringing this hair together and how we use the individual lines to make and create more depth, more volume, and make it look more realistic. So I've seen some more sections through here that didn't have enough colour, so I'm just coming back in with that light peach to fill some in. We're just going to gradually continue building up like that until you get the look that you're looking for. I'm using the colourless blender just to flatten off some of the tooth to make sure that I have filled out most of that grayscale area. I don't want any of the grey to come through. The only grey that I want is the black that I laid down earlier, just to create a little bit more depth around that pin. So just looking back at that now, I can see where there's a need for some darker colours. So I'm just going to continue to build up these colours until I get the look I'm looking for. I'm using the full blender just to soften off the tooth, make sure that it's flat and make sure that I've covered the areas that I need to. So I'm actually fairly happy with the hair now, and I want to move on to the jewellery, the feathers and the clothes, and then I can finish off the ribbon and also the bird as well. I'm going to put some multiple colours through the clothing and the feathers. I'm starting with deep cobalt green. I'm just lining in and shading the dark areas of the top here that have got creases. I'm also going to line around the feathers and also down some of those darker feather sections that have already been made out or marked out and shaded out. So you can see that I'm just using lines and following the same texture that the feathers already had. So just doing that, I notice there's a tiny little bit of shoulder there that I've missed. So I'm going to go back in and fill out the skin colours. So first of all, I have the light cadmium yellow, just filling a bit of that in. And also the medium flesh I've come in with there as well. It is at the back there, so it's going to be a lot darker than the other sections anyway. So I've just gone in and filled that out. You could also go in with that section there and just put yellow in it, and you wouldn't be able to tell that it was any different. I've got that Prussian blue again that we used in the eyes, and I'm just coming over some sections in there as well. We're mixing these colours together so there's no defined colour difference between them. I'm going to use this on the clothes down the bottom here as well, just lining out in the direction that the clothing's already going. I'm lightly covering over those lighter sections of clothes and actually deepening or putting more pressure on those darker areas where those shadows were already marked out. I'm going to add in some purple violet. I didn't want to just use violet because we've already used that in the background. I wanted this color to sort of stand out a little bit more from the rest of it, so it's got a little bit more blue in it. Just coming in and just going over the same sections that I went over before and adding this in. So we're trying to create a little bit of a multicolored look through here. We're going to have some sections that'll be blue, some will be green, and some will be purple. I'm using the white to blend this out and make it sort of smudged through, and I'm also putting a little bit of that light yellow in there as well, just to add some of that glow and reflection into our clothes. I'm going to do the same with the feathers, just in some of those lighter sections, add this in, and then go over it with the white to blend it all in nice and smooth together. So now that I've finished blending out, I want to bring that Peruvian blue back in, and I just want to deepen up some of those real core shadow areas of the feathers here. After I've done this shadow area, I'm going to bring the white gel pen in. With the white gel pen, I want the clothing to look like it is glittering and shiny, so I'm going to put loads of tiny little dots all over that to give it kind of a shimmery effect. I'm also going to put this effect through the hair, so it kind of looks like sparkles through the hair, and some other areas on the background there as well. I need to colour in those fingernails, so I'm using deep red, which we used in the lips, just for the shadow areas. Then I'm going to blend it out with some alizarin crimson, and then we're going to use a white gel pen to put a highlight on there. We might actually blend this out as well. We're going to use the ivory to do that. So I'm going to use that deep, or dark red I should say, for the ribbon. I'm going to use the dark red and the alizarin crimson and also white in there. So all I'm doing is going over the really dark sections with the dark red first, then I'm going to go further out into those lighter grey areas with the alizarin crimson, and then over the top of the white areas I'm going to blend out with white and just blend that all the way out and over the red sections as well. And then we'll go back in and just deepen up those shadows. So I'm using dark red at the moment. So now I've done that, I'm going to grab the alizarin crimson and go over the top of this and extend them further out towards those grey areas. And we're just going to leave that little section in the middle which will be white, which we'll come back in with in a moment. I do actually think that we need to add some yellow in for the glow as well, so we will probably add a little bit of light cadmium yellow in a moment too. Just notice there's some sky at the back of her head as well, so I'm just going to put a little bit of the yellow in there and then go back in with the purple. And I'm also putting this into the little highlighted section, so not a lot, just enough to add a little bit of a reflection of the glow. So I've just got the violet for the rest of the background there. And I'm going to blend that out with the white like we did on the other side as well. And I've just added the white gel pen spots in the back there as well. We're going to get back to this ribbon now, and I'm colouring it out or blending it out and softening all of those sections off now with the white Caran d'Ache. Just going over the top of the yellow sections as well and just filling this in to smooth off the whole ribbon area. So you can see now with the ribbon that we've got those really dark deep shadow areas and the really light sections there where the ribbon's curling over and coming more forward. So I've just added a little bit more of the light cadmium yellow just in those sections there to show that highlight a bit more. It wasn't quite bright enough, but I wanted to add the white on first so that the glow would sit on the top of that. Just using that alizarin crimson just to go back into those deep shadow areas and really deepen and darken those lines up now. So let's start on the jewellery. I'm going to do it quite rough. I'm not going in with some fine details because they're kind of blurred out a little bit. I'm going to use the light cadmium yellow to put this into those very light highlight areas because we would definitely have a glow off those areas, or a shine even. And I've missed a little bit of skin, so I've just got light flesh just to go in and fill those areas out. I don't like to leave any grey, so that also is helping with that. So just finishing off with that light cadmium yellow. I'm going to use purple violet for all of the jewels, and I'm going to go into the darker sections. I'm kind of putting a ring around the outside, and also Jennifer's put a little bit of darker colour through the middle. So I'm just following over those areas now with this colour. I'm going to use a white gel pen to put some little shiny spots on each of these sections of the jewellery, as well as all the really highlighted shiny areas that Jennifer's already marked out. So we've almost finished the jewellery section. We've just got the very background and the little birdie to do. I just wanted to have a quick chat about the birdie. I just used a couple of colours, looked up a robin and found the most popular coloured robin and used those colours. However, if you want to see a pretty full-on and in-depth detailed tutorial on the bird, Jennifer's actually popped up a video of that on her channel, so I'll pop that in the link below as well, so you can check that out and see how she does it more in depth and with a little bit more detail in there as well for you. Now I'm just finishing off the jewelry in her hair now. Okay, so we've got our little birdie here, and we've also got the background area here around. I actually thought this would actually look quite nice cut out and stuck onto a piece of scrapbook paper with patterns and things on it, something pretty like that. I decided just to colour it with purple. I'm using the violet colour just to go in and lay this down. However, the paper's not that great doing large areas like this, so I actually do need to use a solvent just to soften off the background a little bit. I will skip through this part fairly quickly for you because all I'm doing is shading and colouring in, and then I'm going to use the I've got to Zest It pencil blend to go in with a brush and just sort of soften off those areas a little bit around the edges and blend it all in nicely. Because of the type of paper, I ended up scribbling it out really roughly, just putting a whole heap of lines through there. What I'm actually going to do now is grab that paintbrush. I'm using a filbert shaped paintbrush, and I'm just going to go in and rub it over the pencil solvent over the top of it, and just blend it in nice and smoothly. I'm going to use some circular motions to push in the tooth of the paper and make sure that the pigment of the pencil is nicely spread out and that all of those lines disappear. I'm going to use a white pastel just to go over those areas and rub it in with my finger just to soften off the colour a little bit and make it look a little bit more fuzzy. Okay, so now I've done that, we're going to work on the little birdie. So I actually just got my phone out and I googled a robin to see what colour a robin would be or is, and it seems that mainly they're brown and they do have a reddy orange chest on them as well. So I was quite happy to follow along with that kind of colouring, and I just wanted to make sure that I had the right colours, so I did get a lot of Batman and Robin when I was searching them, but I've decided to go with the traditional sort of colours of it. So I'm starting with burnt sienna, and I'm just going into the really deep dark shadow areas on the head and also underneath the wing and under the belly a little bit. Just going in with burnt ochre just over those same areas and starting to fill it up into the whiter areas as well. I've also put a little bit of this on the chest because it will go well with the oranges and the kind of red colour in there as well. I'm just kind of doing little strokes and doing it quite softly through here with a little bit of texture. I've got orange glaze and I'm going in over the top of the front section of the chest there where it's going to be mostly red or orange coloured. And I've got dark chrome yellow and I'm just going in over the top of that again, and I'm just making that a little bit deeper, and I'm actually trying to burnish off the paper a little bit. I've spread this through the wings a little bit as well and also over the rest of the body. I've got ivory, which I'm going to do on the bottom of the belly and up into the chest there, and also on the rest of the wings here. I think we need an orange brown, so I'm going to use sanguine and go in and keep filling out over the darker areas, just building upon the colours that we've already done. I'm just going to use black for the beak, and I'm also going to add some of this around the eyes and a little bit through the wings and things as well. So we just want to deepen up the shadow areas of the wings and put a little bit more texture through. So I'm using little sort of dashes and dots through there just to create a little bit of texture. Need some more of that caput mortuum. I'm going to put this on the legs and also the feet, and I'm going to put a little bit around the wings and under the belly there as well, and also maybe bring it up on top of the head too. So almost finished, guys. Don't forget, if you want to see more full real-time tutorials like this one, then make sure you do check out Patreon. I've popped the link in the description below there. We just need some white gel pen on the eyes there just to show that little shiny spot, and I've also put a tiny little bit on the beak and a little bit of texture through the belly. I just put my finger over it to soften off a little bit so it doesn't look like it's standing up from the rest of it. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. It was so much fun, and I've popped all of the links in the description below, so make sure to follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Vero, and make sure you check out Jennifer's channel as well. I'll pop it in the cards above as well. Thanks again guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.